The stadium was so loud that Emma Calloway could feel the vibration of it moving through the soles of her sneakers and settling somewhere deep in her chest. It was the kind of roar that made you forget your name, forget your week, forget the fact that you had worked a double shift the night before and your feet still ached in a way that no amount of soaking could fix. She had earned this ticket. Patty, her older sister, had won 2 seats in a radio station giveaway and had pressed one into Emma's palm 3 days ago with the kind of look that said, "You need this more than you know." Emma had agreed, mostly because saying no to Patty was like trying to argue with sunshine. She was also honest enough with herself to admit that she had not done anything fun in a very long time. Fun had been quietly pushed to the edges of her life, while rent and bills and the long hours at the diner filled the center of it. The stadium was a different world entirely. Everything in it was enormous and bright and smelled of hot dogs and popcorn and the particular excitement of 60,000 people wanting the same thing at the same time. Emma clutched her ticket and followed the flow of bodies toward her section. She squinted at the numbers on the ticket, then at the letters on the wall, then at the numbers on the seats. She counted twice because she was the kind of person who counted twice. She sat down, tucked her jacket under her arm, and let out a long, slow breath. The view from this seat was extraordinary. She had not expected that. The field stretched out below her like something from a painting, green and perfect, and so carefully lined that it seemed almost unreal. She pulled her phone out to take a picture for Patty, who had not been able to come because of a last-minute shift change at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. Emma was still composing the text. She felt the presence beside her before she heard the voice. It was the kind of presence that takes up more space than it should. Not because of size, but because of something harder to name.
You are my seat.
The voice was low and unhurried, the kind of voice that was accustomed to being heard without raising itself. Emma looked up and found a man standing in the row beside her, looking down at her with an expression that was not quite irritated but was not particularly warm either. He was tall, dark-haired, wearing a simple dark jacket that fit him the way expensive things always fit, like it had been made with him specifically in mind. His jaw was strong and his eyes were a deep shade of brown that caught the stadium lights in a way that felt almost unfair. Emma looked at her ticket again. She looked at the number on the seat. Her face went warm. She said, "Oh no." She stood up quickly, nearly dropping her phone. She checked her ticket a 3rd time and saw it clearly now. The number 7 printed on her ticket versus the number 8 printed on the seat. She was one off. One single seat to the left of where she was supposed to be. "I am so sorry," she said, stepping back. "I miscounted. That is completely my fault." She expected him to simply sit down and be done with it. Instead, he looked at the seat she had been occupying, and then at the one beside it, the seat she actually belonged in, and something shifted in his expression. "It is fine," he said. But he said it in the way people say things when they mean a slightly different version of the same words. They both sat down. Emma arranged herself as quietly as possible, which was difficult because the stadium was electric now and the players were warming up on the field, and everything around her was vibrating with noise and energy. She kept her eyes forward and tried to pretend the entire moment had not happened. It lasted about 4 minutes. The man beside her took a phone call. She was not trying to listen, but the seats were close, and the call involved a number so large that it passed through her hearing and registered, somewhere in the back of her mind, like a small, quiet shock. She kept her face perfectly still and stared at the field. When he hung up, he was quiet for a moment, and then, without looking at her, he said, "Are you actually a fan, or did someone give you that ticket?" Emma turned to look at him. "Excuse me?" "It is a genuine question," he said, still watching the field. "Most people who sit in the wrong seat are at their first game." Emma straightened in her chair. "I sat in the wrong seat because I miscounted, not because I do not know football. And yes, I am a fan. I grew up watching this team with my father every Sunday. He had this old recliner that he refused to get rid of even though it was falling apart, and every Sunday from September to February, that chair was his throne." The man turned to look at her then. It was the first time he had actually looked at her, not at the ticket or the seat, but at her. Something in his expression changed in a way that was very small and very hard to read. "Read," he said, and he extended his hand. "Emma," she replied, and she shook it. His hand was warm. She noticed that, and then told herself she had not. The game began, and for a while they watched in silence, which was not uncomfortable the way she had expected. When the home team scored on a long pass that the whole stadium rose for, Emma was on her feet before she knew she was standing. And she heard Reed Harmon laugh beside her. Not a polite laugh. A real one. "You do know football," he said. "I told you," she said, and she smiled at the field. Reed Harmon had been to over 40 games in this stadium. He had sat in this seat, or in a private box above. It or in various configurations of the two depending on who he was entertaining or what kind of evening he needed it to be. He had never once felt the particular feeling that settled over him now, which was the sensation of being next to someone who was completely and genuinely present. Emma Calloway was not checking her phone. She was not performing her enjoyment for anyone. She was simply there. Full of it, lit up from inside by something he realized he had not seen in a very long time in the circles he moved through. At halftime she bought 2 hot dogs from a vendor without asking him if he wanted one, and simply held one out to him. He looked at it for a moment. "I can pay for my own," he said. "I know you can," she said. "But I already bought it, so you should just eat it before it gets cold." Ate it. It was the best hot dog he had tasted in years, which made no logical sense. But there it was. By the fourth quarter, they were deep in a conversation about the offensive line that had begun as a disagreement, turned into something animated and genuinely enjoyable. Emma used her hands when she talked. She laughed easily and without any of the careful calculation that Red was used to encountering. When the final buzzer sounded and the home team had won by a field goal, the whole stadium erupted and Emma grabbed his arm without thinking and then immediately let go and looked embarrassed. "Sorry," she said. "Do not apologize," he said quietly. They filed out with the crowd, carried along in the wave of celebrating strangers. At the exit where the flow of people naturally divided them, Reed turned and found her. "It was good to meet you." "Emma," he said. "It was good to meet you too, Reed," she said. And then the crowd swallowed the distance. Between them and she was gone, Reed stood at the edge of the parking lot for a moment longer than he needed to, his hands in his pockets, watching the place where she had disappeared into the crowd of celebrating strangers. It was a strange feeling, wanting to know where a person was going. He could not remember the last time he had felt it. He did not know her last name. He did not know where she lived. He only knew that she had sat in the wrong seat and talked about an old recliner like it. It was the most important piece of furniture that had ever existed. And that somewhere in the noise of 60,000 people, he had heard his own laugh and barely recognized it. The Blue Ribbon Diner sat on the corner of 5th and Maple like it had always been there and always would be. The kind of place that smelled like coffee and butter from half a block away and had a hand-painted sign in the window that said "Open at 6" and meant it. Emma Calloway had worked there for 4 years. She knew every crack in the tile floor, every sticky spot on the laminate counter, and exactly how long it took the coffee machine to grind. Through a full pot on a busy morning, she was refilling the sugar dispensers. At table 7, when the bell above, the door rang, and she looked up, out of habit. Red Harmon walked in. Emma set the sugar dispenser down, carefully so she would not drop it. She blinked once, because she was a practical person, and practical people confirmed what they were seeing before reacting to it. But there was no question. It was him. Same dark jacket, same unhurried way of moving through a space. Same presence that seemed to occupy more room than it physically needed. He looked around the diner the way people look at places they've never been before, taking in the checkered tablecloths and the old photographs of the city on the walls and the pie display case near the register. Then his eyes found her, and something in his expression settled. Like a person who has been looking for something and finally located it, Emma picked the sugar dispenser back up and walked over to him. "You found me," she said. "Your name tag at the game," he said. It had the diner's logo on it. I remembered it. She looked down at the small embroidered patch on her uniform shirt. The Blue Ribbon Diner in pale blue stitching. She had worn that shirt to the game because she had come straight from a shift and had not had time to go home and change. She had completely forgotten about it. "That is either very observant or very concerning," she said. The corner of his mouth moved. "I prefer observant." Gloria appeared from behind the counter like she had been launched from a cannon, her dark curly hair pinned up and her eyes moving between Emma and Reed with the focused energy of someone who had already developed an entire theory about the situation. "I will take this one," Gloria said to Emma, smiling at Reed with full professional brightness. "You will not," Emma said pleasantly, and she gestured toward a booth by the window. "This way." Reed sat across from her in the booth and looked at the laminated menu she handed him. He held it the way a person holds something unfamiliar, which told her everything she needed to know about how often Reed Harmon ate at places with laminated menus. "The coffee is good," she said. "The pie is better. The cheeseburger will change your life if you let it." He looked up from the menu. "High praise. Honest praise," she said. "Those are different things." Ordered the cheeseburger and a black coffee, and when Emma brought them to the table, she stayed to refill a nearby customer's cup, and when she came back, he had eaten half the burger with the focused attention of someone who had not expected to enjoy it as much as he was. She said, "You were not wrong," he said, and there was something genuine in his voice that had not been there in their first conversation. Or maybe it had been there, and she had not recognized it yet. He came back the next day, and the day after that, by the fourth visit, Gloria had stopped pretending she was not watching and simply watched openly from behind the counter with her arms folded, and the expression of someone watching a very satisfying television program. Each time Reed came in, he stayed a little longer. He came in mid-morning when the diner was quiet and the breakfast rush had cleared and the lunch crowd had not yet arrived. And Emma would bring his coffee, and they would talk. They talked about football because that was where they had started, and it was comfortable ground. Then they talked about other things. Emma told him about growing up in a house with 3 sisters and a father who worked construction and a mother who made everything in that house feel larger than it. She talked about the way Saturday mornings used to smell, like her mother's biscuits, and how she still made them every weekend because some things you do not let go of. Reed listened the way he had listened at the game, completely and without the distracted quality that Emma had noticed in most people. He asked questions that proved he had heard the previous answer. It was a small thing, but it was not small at all. He talked less than she did. She noticed that too, but what he said was always worth the quiet that came before it. One morning he told her that he had not eaten a meal at a table with another person in nearly 3 months, because his schedule had not allowed for it. And the way he said it was so matter-of-fact that it took her a moment to feel the loneliness inside it. "That is not a schedule," she said. "That is a sentence." He looked at her for a moment. "Yes," he said quietly. "I suppose it is." Things shifted after that morning. There was less performance on both sides of the table. Reed stopped arriving with his phone in his hand and started leaving it in his pocket. Emma stopped reminding herself to be professional and simply talk to him the way she talked to people she had known for years. One Tuesday morning he arrived, and the diner was unusually empty, and Emma sat down across from him in the booth instead of standing beside it. She had not planned to do it. It simply happened, and neither of them commented on it. They both understood something had quietly moved forward. He told her about Dennis, his older brother, who called him every Sunday and left long voicemails about football scores that Red rarely had time to listen to in full. He said it with a smile that was also something else underneath. Emma thought about Patty pressing that ticket into her palm and saying, "You need this more than you know," and she understood the something else completely. "You should call him back," she said. "I know," he said. "Not eventually," she said. "Today." He looked at her across the table. Nobody in Reed Harmon's life told him what to do. They suggested and recommended and proposed and submitted for his consideration. They did not sit in diner booths with worn tablecloths and say "not eventually" today and mean it with such quiet certainty that it was impossible to argue. With "today," he agreed. Emma smiled and stood up to refill his coffee and read, Harmon watched her move through the diner and felt something open in his chest that he had been keeping carefully closed for a very long time. He recognized it the same way Emma had recognized him walking through the door. Not with surprise, but with the particular feeling of something that was always supposed to happen, finally happening right on time. He did not know yet that his mother had found out. He did not know that Susan Harmon had made a single phone call that afternoon that would land like a stone in still water. And he did not know that Emma Calloway, for all her warmth and steadiness, had a limit to what she would allow herself to want. But all of that was coming in the quiet of that Tuesday morning in the Blue Ribbon Diner was the last simple thing they would have for a while. Susan Harmon arrived at the Blue Ribbon Diner on a Wednesday morning, and she did not look like someone who had ever eaten at a place with a pie display case and a hand-painted sign. She was tall and dressed in a pale gray coat that cost more than Emma's monthly rent, and she wore the particular expression of a woman who had decided something. Before she walked through the door, Emma was behind the counter when she came in. Gloria made a small sound beside her that was not quite a word. Susan chose the booth by the window, the one where Reed sat every morning, and she ordered a tea that Emma was fairly certain they could not make to her standard. Emma brought it anyway and set it down, and Susan Harmon looked up at her with eyes that were the same deep brown as her son's, but held none of the warmth she had come to know in them. It was not a question. "I do not," Emma said honestly. Something moved across Susan's face. She had expected recognition. The absence of it seemed to rearrange her approach slightly. "I am Reed's mother," she said. Emma kept her expression easy. "What can I do for you? You can be honest with yourself," Susan said, wrapping both hands around the teacup. "My son is a very important man with a great deal of responsibility. He has an image to protect and a company that affects thousands of people's livelihoods. Whatever this is," she gestured at the diner around her in a way that managed to include everything in it, "it is a distraction he cannot afford." Emma was quiet for a moment. She had grown up in a house where money was careful and earned slowly, and she had never been ashamed of that, not once. But she had also never had it used against her so politely and so precisely before. "I appreciate you coming in," Emma said, and she meant it without sarcasm. "Can I get you anything else?" Suzanne left a $50 bill on the table for a $2 tea and walked out without looking back. Emma stood at the counter for a long time after that. Gloria appeared beside her and did not say anything, which was how Emma knew it was serious, because Gloria always had something too. Say. Reed came in the next morning, and something in Emma's face must have shown, because he stopped 2 steps inside the door and looked at her with that careful attention of his. "What happened?" he said. "Nothing," she said. He crossed the diner and sat down in the booth and waited. He was good at waiting. She had learned that about him. Emma brought the coffee and sat across from him and folded her hands on the table and told him about his mother's visit in plain, simple words, without drama or decoration. She watched his face while she talked. She saw the jaw tighten and the eyes go flat and a careful stillness settle over him that was different from his usual quiet. When she finished, he was silent for a moment. "I am sorry," he said. "That was not acceptable." "She loves you," Emma said. "She is afraid of what she does not understand." "I am not angry at her." "I am. That is your right," she said. "But Reed, I need to say something, and I need you to hear it clearly." He nodded. "Double quotes, I do not want to be something that complicates your life," she said. "I did not sit in that wrong seat looking for anything. I was just watching a football game. And what has happened since then has been," she paused, choosing the word carefully, "unexpected and good. But I am a waitress in a diner, and you are who you are, and I am not interested in pretending that does not come with a weight." Reed set his coffee cup down. "You sat in the wrong seat," he said slowly. "And in 4 hours you made me laugh more than I had in a year. You told me about your father's recliner, and I thought about my own father for the first time in months without it hurting. You handed me a hot dog like it was the most natural thing in the world, and it was." He paused. "Emma, I've built an entire career on knowing the value of things. I have never once been wrong about what matters." She looked at him across the table. "I called Dennis," he said, "that Sunday, after you told me to. We talked for 2 hours. He cried a little and pretended he had not. It was the best phone call I have had in years. He reached across the table and covered her folded hands with one of his. You did that? Not my schedule or my company or my mother. You. Emma looked down at his hand over hers. She thought about her father watching games in that falling-apart recliner. She thought about Patty handing her that ticket. She thought about 60,000 people in a stadium and a single wrong seat that had somehow landed her here. Your mother is not going to make this easy, she said. No, he agreed. But I've been making easy choices my whole life, and they have gotten me to a place where I eat alone for 3 months and do not notice. He squeezed her hands gently. I would rather make the right choice. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Outside the diner window, 5th Street moved through its ordinary morning, and the city went about its business, and inside the blue ribbon diner, something small and real and very important held its breath. Okay, she said. Finally, okay, he said, and the word came out like relief. Gloria knocked over an entire stack of menus behind the counter and did not even pretend it was an accident. Reed looked over his shoulder at her. Gloria smiled at the ceiling. Emma covered her face with her hand and laughed, and Reed Harmon heard it land in his chest in exactly the place where something had been missing for a very long time. And he thought that if the universe had wanted to show him what he had been building toward all these years, it had chosen a very specific and perfect and completely unexpected way to do it. One wrong seat. One loud stadium. One honest woman with flour on her cuff from biscuits she made every Saturday. Because some things you do not let go of. He was not going to let go of this.
Thank you for watching this story. Please subscribe this channel.